The chlorine stung my nostrils as I cut through the water, my blonde hair tucked beneath a tight swim cap. Another morning, another ritual. I'd always been more comfortable in water than on land. Precise, controlled, deliberate. That's when I first saw her. Her butterfly stroke was a goddamn work of art. Powerful shoulders, lean muscles rippling beneath sun-kissed skin, moving with a grace that made every other swimmer look like a clumsy child. I found myself slowing, watching her technique. Damn. The changing room was humid, steamy. I was adjusting my designer watch when she rounded the corner, droplets cascading down her brunette hair. We collided hard. My expensive leather bag tumbled, contents spilling across the tile. Seriously? I muttered. She didn't apologize. Instead, she raised an eyebrow. You're in the way. Her green eyes were unapologetic, challenging. I recognized that look. It was the same defiance I saw in chefs, who thought their mediocre dishes deserved praise. I'm Sophia Rogers, I said coldly, gathering my scattered items. Alana Clark, she replied, already moving past me. Little did I know that name would change everything. Later that evening, reviewing my upcoming restaurant critiques, I stopped dead. The name clicked, Alana Clark, owner of Verdant, the new farm-to-table spot everyone was buzzing about. And now? My next review target. Something told me this wouldn't be a typical assignment. The way she moved in the pool, the defiance in her eyes. This was going to be interesting. I took a sip of Cabernet, a wry smile playing on my lips. Game on, Miss Clark. I stepped into Verdant, my pen already itching to tear it apart. The decor was a mishmash of rustic and modern, trying too hard, as usual. I settled into my corner table, observing the bustling Friday night crowd. The menu was ambitious, I'll give her that. But ambition without execution is just delusion. The chef recommends the herb-crusted lamb, the waiter offered. I smiled thinly. I'll be the judge of that. 3 courses later, I was conflicted. The flavors were bold, unexpected, but the plating was amateurish and the wine pairings were questionable at best. As I left, I caught a glimpse of Alana in the kitchen. Our eyes met briefly, and I felt a strange flutter in my chest. I pushed it aside. I had a job to do. Back home, I poured myself a generous glass of scotch and began to write. The words flowed easily, sharp and biting. Verdant aims high but falls short. While showing promise, Chef Clark's creations lack the refinement expected at this price point. One wonders if her time would be better spent perfecting technique rather than chasing trends. I hit send, a familiar satisfaction settling over me. Another mediocre restaurant put in its place. The fallout was swift, my inbox filled with angry emails from Verdant supporters. Social media erupted. Good. Controversy sells. A week later, I found myself at the annual Glendale Food Festival. The air was thick with the scent of sizzling meat and sweet confections. I made my way through the stalls, jotting notes and tasting samples. You've got some nerve showing up here. I turned to find Alana glaring at me, her green eyes blazing. God, she was stunning when she was angry. I'm just doing my job, I replied coolly. Your job? She scoffed. You're nothing but a bitter hack who gets off on destroying people's dreams. I felt my own temper rising. I speak the truth. If you can't handle criticism... Criticism? Alana stepped closer, her voice low and dangerous. You wouldn't know real food if it bit you on your pretentious ass. We were drawing attention now. Phones were out, recording our confrontation. At least I know how to pair a decent wine, I shot back. Alana's eyes narrowed. In one fluid motion, she grabbed a nearby glass of red wine and dumped it over my head. The crowd gasped. For a moment, I stood there, stunned, as the cool liquid trickled down my face and stained my white blouse. Then, to my own surprise, I started laughing. Alana looked bewildered. What's so funny? I wiped my eyes, still chuckling. You just proved my point about your poor choice in wines. This is clearly a subpar vintage. A flicker of amusement crossed her face before she caught herself. You're impossible, she muttered, but I could see the hint of a smile. As she stormed off, I became acutely aware of the dozens of phones still pointed in my direction. Well, this would certainly make the evening news. Later that night, as I scrolled through the viral videos of our encounter, I couldn't shake the image of Alana's fierce green eyes. There was something there, beneath the anger. Something that made my heart race in a way it hadn't in years. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. This was ridiculous. She was just another chef, another review, nothing more. But as I drifted off to sleep, the scent of wine still lingering in my hair, I couldn't help but wonder what our next encounter would bring. The pool was my sanctuary, a place where the noise of the world faded away. But lately, it had become a battlefield of sorts. I sliced through the water, trying to focus on my form, but my eyes kept drifting to the lane next to me. Alana was there, her powerful strokes cutting through the water with effortless grace. Damn her. Our eyes met as we both came up for air. She smirked, picking up her pace. Oh, so that's how it was going to be? I matched her stroke for stroke, our impromptu race drawing curious glances from other swimmers. We touched the wall at the same time, both gasping for breath. Not bad for a wine-soaked critic, Alana panted, a challenge in her eyes. You're not so terrible yourself, for a trend-chasing chef? I shot back, fighting a smile. The tension between us was electric, charged with something I couldn't quite name, or maybe didn't want to. Later that evening, I found myself at my favorite wine bar, laptop open as I worked on my latest review. The place was quiet, dimly lit, perfect for losing yourself in thought. Well, if it isn't the shark of the culinary world. I looked up to find Alana sliding onto the bar stool next to me, a glass of red in her hand. My heart did a little flip. Careful, I warned, eyeing her glass. I'd hate to see another good shirt ruined. She laughed, the sound rich and warm. Truce? At least for tonight? I hesitated, then nodded. Truce. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as the wine. She told me about her struggles opening Verdant, the sleepless nights and constant doubt. I found myself sharing stories of my early days as a critic, the pressure to be ruthless. You know, Alana said, leaning in close, you're not as terrible as I thought. Gee, thanks, I replied dryly, but I was smiling. Her eyes dropped to my lips, and for a moment, I thought she might kiss me. My breath caught in my throat. But then she pulled back, clearing her throat. I should go. Early start tomorrow. I nodded, trying to ignore the disappointment settling in my chest. Of course. As she left, I couldn't help but watch her go, my mind spinning with conflicting emotions. The next few weeks were a blur of deadlines and restaurant openings, but no matter where I went, my thoughts kept drifting back to Alana. Her laugh, her fierce determination, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about food. I was in trouble. Sitting at my desk, staring at a half-finished review, I realized I couldn't focus. Every word I wrote felt hollow, disconnected. This wasn't me. My phone buzzed with a text from my editor, Marcus. Got your next assignment. New fusion place downtown. Heard the chef's a real firecracker. I stared at the message, a strange feeling of dread settling over me. For the first time in my career, I didn't want to write a scathing review. I didn't want to tear someone's dream apart. What the hell was happening to me? I closed my laptop, grabbing my keys. I needed air, needed to clear my head. Somehow I found myself outside Verdant. The lights were still on, and through the window I could see Alana in the kitchen, hair tied back, completely focused as she worked on what looked like a new dish. My heart ached at the sight. She was beautiful, passionate, everything I'd convinced myself I didn't need in my life. Before I could stop myself, I was pushing open the door. Alana looked up, surprise flickering across her face. Sophia! What are you? I crossed the room in a few quick strides, cupped her face in my hands, and kissed her. For a moment she was still. Then, with a soft sigh, she melted into me, her lips moving against mine with a hunger that matched my own. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, Alana's eyes were wide. What was that for? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Let's just say, I'm developing a new taste. She grinned, pulling me close again. Well, in that case, how about a private tasting menu? As our lips met once more, I knew my life was about to change in ways I never could have imagined, and for once I was ready to savor every moment of it. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over Alana's sleeping form. I traced the curve of her shoulder, marveling at how quickly my life had changed. Stop staring, she mumbled, her eyes still closed. I chuckled. Can't help it? You're kind of gorgeous. She cracked one eye open, a smile playing on her lips. Flattery will get you everywhere, Ms. Rogers. As I leaned in to kiss her, my phone buzzed insistently. I groaned, reaching for it. Sophia, where's that review? Marcus's voice was tense. Deadline's in 3 hours. Shit. I'd completely forgotten. I'll have it to you, I promised, my stomach churning. Alana propped herself up on an elbow, concern etched on her face. Everything okay? I forced a smile. Just work. I should probably go. She nodded, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. As I dressed, I felt the weight of my profession settling back onto my shoulders. Back at my apartment, I stared at the blank document on my screen. The words wouldn't come. Every time I tried to write my usual biting critique, I thought of Alana's passion, her dedication. With a frustrated sigh, I began to type. The review that emerged was different, still honest, but gentler. I highlighted the restaurant's strengths while offering constructive criticism on areas for improvement. I hit send with seconds to spare, then waited for the inevitable backlash. Marcus called almost immediately. What the hell was that? An honest review, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. It was soft, he growled. You're losing your edge, Sophia. The words stung more than I cared to admit. Was I losing my edge, or was I finally seeing the humanity behind the plates? That evening, I met Alana at Verdant. She was elbow-deep in prep work, a smudge of flour on her cheek. My heart did a little flip at the sight. Hey you, she smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. Want to be my guinea pig? I'm working on a new dish. I hesitated. Actually, can we talk? Her smile faltered. That doesn't sound good. We settled into a quiet corner of the restaurant. I took a deep breath. I need to tell you something about my job. Alana listened intently as I explained the pressure I was under, the expectation to be ruthless. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. So, what are you saying? She finally asked. That we can't be together because of your job? No, I said quickly. God, no, I'm saying. I think I need to change. I don't want to be that person anymore. She reached across the table, taking my hand. Then don't be. You're more than just your review, Sophia. I squeezed her hand, feeling a weight lift from my chest. Thank you. As we leaned in to kiss, a wave of nausea suddenly washed over Alana. She pulled back, her face pale. Are you okay? I asked, concerned. She nodded, but her smile was strained. Just a stomach bug, I think. I've been feeling off for a few days. I insisted on taking her home, tucking her into bed with a mug of ginger tea. As I kissed her forehead, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Alana and I fell into a comfortable rhythm, stealing moments together between her long hours at the restaurant and my writing deadlines. But there was an undercurrent of tension I couldn't quite place. Alana seemed distracted, often lost in thought, and the stomach bug persisted, with frequent bouts of nausea in the mornings. One evening, as we cuddled on her couch, a half-eaten container of her latest culinary experiment between us, I finally broached the subject. Alana, is everything okay? You've seemed off lately. She stiffened in my arms. I'm fine, just stressed about the restaurant. I pulled back, looking into her eyes. You know you can tell me anything, right? For a moment I thought she might confide in me, but then she plastered on a smile. I know, really I'm okay. I nodded, not entirely convinced. As I reached for another bite of food, my hand brushed against her bag, knocking it over. A small bottle rolled out. Prenatal vitamins. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I picked up the bottle with trembling hands, my mind racing. Alana, I said slowly, is there something you want to tell me? Her eyes widened as she saw what I was holding. The color drained from her face. Sophia, I can explain. But before she could finish, my phone rang. It was Marcus. Turn on the news, he said without preamble. Now. I fumbled for the remote, switching on the TV. There, splashed across the screen, was a photo of Alana and me kissing outside Verdant. The headline read, Critics Compromise, Sophia Rogers' Secret Affair with Local Chef. Alana gasped beside me. I felt the ground crumbling beneath my feet. In the span of a few seconds, everything had changed. Again. The media storm hit like a category hurricane. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Emails, texts, social media notifications, a relentless barrage of questions, accusations, and speculation. Marcus had been calling non-stop, each message more frantic than the last. "We need to talk damage control," he'd said during our third call that morning. Alana sat across from me, her green eyes distant. The prenatal vitamin bottle sat between us like a ticking time bomb. "I was going to tell you," she said softly. "I just didn't know how." The restaurant world could be brutal, but this was a whole new level of exposure. My reputation as an objective critic was in tatters. Every review I'd ever written was now under scrutiny, questioned for potential bias. "How long?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. She took a deep breath. "About 8 weeks." The timing hit me like a punch. This wasn't just a casual fling anymore. This was complicated. My phone pinged with another notification. A rival food critic had already published a scathing piece about our relationship, questioning my professional integrity. "Sophia Rogers sleeps with the enemy," the headline read. "I'm sorry," Alana whispered. I reached across the table, taking her hand. "This isn't your fault." But we both knew everything had changed. The next few days were a blur of crisis management. Marcus insisted I lay low, avoid social media, stop responding to press inquiries. But Alana's restaurant was taking the brunt of the fallout. "They're canceling reservations," she told me one evening, her voice breaking. "Sponsors are pulling out. One bad review from you, and now this." I watched her carefully. The pregnancy was still our secret, but not for long. The morning sickness was becoming more frequent, harder to hide. A health inspector showed up unexpectedly at Verdant, then another, and another. "They're trying to find something," Alana said, her jaw tight with anger. "Anything to discredit me." I knew how the game worked. In the culinary world, reputation was everything, and we'd just become public enemy number one. My sister Brianna was the only one who seemed supportive. "Screw them," she'd said during our late-night phone call. "You found someone. About damn time." But finding someone and surviving the professional fallout were two very different things. The breaking point came during a local food festival. We'd agreed to lay low, but rumors were swirling. As we walked through the crowded venue, I could feel the stares, hear the whispers. "There they are. Can you believe it? Total conflict of interest." Alana squeezed my hand, her grip tight. I could feel the tension radiating from her body. Then I saw him. Marcus, my editor, cutting through the crowd with a look I knew all too well. This wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Now." Alana stepped forward. "Anything you say to her, you can say to me." The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. The crowd around us went silent, phones discreetly raised, waiting for the drama to unfold. Marcus pulled out a folder. "I've got some interesting information about your little relationship. Information that could destroy both of your careers." My heart raced. What was he talking about? Just then, Alana's hand went to her stomach. A wave of nausea, or something else? The story was about to take another unexpected turn, and we were right in the middle of it. Something told me this was going to be a lot more complicated than just a food critic falling for a chef. The conference room felt like an interrogation chamber. Marcus spread documents across the table. Printouts of my reviews, financial records, communication logs, everything that could potentially destroy our careers. "You've compromised every professional standard," he said, his voice cold. Alana's hand found mine under the table. Her touch was the only thing keeping me grounded. "I want to hear exactly what you're implying," I demanded. Marcus tapped a series of documents, restaurant reviews, financial transfers, dates that seemingly connected in suspicious patterns. The implication was clear. Our relationship had somehow influenced my critical work. The truth was more complicated. Yes, my feelings for Alana had changed how I viewed restaurants, but not in the way he thought. "I've been fair," I said firmly. "Every review stands on its own merit. But fairness doesn't matter in a world hungry for scandal." My phone buzzed. A text from my sister Brianna. "Need backup?" I ignored it, focusing on Marcus. He was laying out a potential career execution, and I needed every ounce of composure. Alana shifted beside me. I could see the morning sickness wearing on her, the paleness of her skin, the slight tremble in her hands. She was fighting her own battle. "We have options," Marcus finally said. "You can resign quietly, or we can make this very public." The threat hung in the air. Outside the conference room, the culinary world was already talking. Blogs, food magazines, social media. Everyone had an opinion about the critic who fell for the chef. A health scare interrupted our standoff. Alana suddenly went pale, her breath catching. Before I could react, she was rushing from the room. I found her in the bathroom, leaning against the sink. "Hey," I said softly, rubbing her back. "You okay?" She looked up, tears mixing with sweat. "This is a mess. My restaurant, your career." I kissed her forehead. "We'll figure it out." But even I didn't believe my own words. The next week was a blur of meetings, lawyers, and increasingly desperate attempts to salvage our professional lives. Verdant was bleeding customers. My reputation as an objective critic was in tatters. One evening, exhausted and defeated, we sat in our apartment. The city lights flickered outside, a reminder of how quickly everything could change. "I'm sorry," Alana whispered. I looked at her, surprised. "For what?" "Disrupting your life. The pregnancy, the scandal." I took her hand. "I'm not sorry, not for a second." The vulnerability in her eyes was something I'd never seen before. This wasn't the fierce chef who dumped wine on me. This was someone terrified of losing everything. A medical appointment revealed more complications. The pregnancy was high risk. The stress wasn't helping. "We need a plan," I told her. Our plan emerged slowly, a strategic retreat. A carefully crafted narrative that might just save us both. Alana would do a complete transparency report for her restaurant. I would write an honest, raw piece about journalistic integrity and personal growth. It was a gamble. But we were all in. As we cuddled that night, her hand on her barely visible bump, I realized something profound. Some risks are worth taking. Some loves are worth fighting for. No matter what happened next, we were in this together. The cursor blinked accusingly on my screen, daring me to type the words that could either save or destroy my career. I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the keys. The truth about taste, a critic's confession. The article poured out of me, raw and honest. I laid bare the evolution of my palate, my perspective, and my heart. How falling in love with a chef had opened my eyes to the passion and dedication behind every plate. I hit send, my heart pounding. There was no going back now. Across town, Alana was doing her own soul-bearing. She'd invited a respected food journalist to Verdant, offering unprecedented access to her kitchen, her books, her process. "I have nothing to hide," she'd told me, her green eyes blazing with determination. As I waited for the fallout, I threw myself into research. I devoured books on pregnancy, cooking techniques, the history of food criticism. If I was going to reinvent myself, I needed to understand every angle. The response to my article was mixed. Some called it a brave new perspective on food criticism. Others decried it as a desperate attempt to save face. The comment sections were battlegrounds of opinion. But something unexpected happened. Chefs started reaching out, not with anger, but with gratitude. They appreciated the acknowledgement of their craft, the human side of the culinary world. One message stood out. "Your words made me remember why I started cooking. Thank you." It wasn't all positive, of course. Rival critics pounced, questioning every review I'd ever written. But I stood firm. This was my truth. Alana's transparency campaign was having its own impact. The health inspectors couldn't find a single violation. Her books were impeccable. Slowly, the tide of public opinion began to turn. One morning, as we shared a quiet breakfast, Alana's phone buzzed. Her eyes widened as she read the message. "What is it?" I asked, concern creeping into my voice. She looked up, a mix of disbelief and joy on her face. "We've been nominated for a James Beard Award for innovation in restaurant management." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Are you serious?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "They said our response to the crisis set a new standard for transparency in the industry." I pulled her into a tight embrace, feeling her bump press against me. This was more than we could have hoped for. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Interviews, photo shoots, a flurry of media attention. But this time, we controlled the narrative. We were no longer the scandalous couple, but innovators pushing for change in a notoriously cutthroat industry. My editor, Marcus, called me into his office. I braced myself for another confrontation. "I underestimated you," he said, his tone grudgingly respectful. "Your article, it sparked a real conversation in the food world." I nodded, waiting for the other shoe to drop. He slid a contract across the desk. "We want you to write a book, your journey from critic to advocate." I stared at the paper, my mind racing. This was an opportunity to reshape food criticism, to bridge the gap between chef and critic. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice steady. That night, as Alana and I walked hand in hand through a farmer's market, sampling local produce and chatting with vendors, I realized how much had changed. I was no longer just observing the culinary world. I was part of it, deeply and irrevocably. Alana paused at a stall, her eyes lighting up at a display of heirloom tomatoes. "These would be perfect for a new dish I'm working on," she mused. I watched her, marveling at her excitement, her creativity. This was the passion I'd been missing in my writing for so long. "I love you," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She turned to me, a soft smile on her face. "I love you too, you big softie." As we continued our stroll, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. The critics, the naysayers, the skeptics, they didn't matter. We were writing our own story now. And it was delicious. The James Beard Awards ceremony was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. Alana's hand was warm in mine, her emerald dress highlighting the soft swell of her belly. At 7 months pregnant, she was radiant. "You ready for this?" I whispered. She squeezed my hand. "As I'll ever be." The category for innovation in restaurant management was announced. My heart raced as they read the nominees. When they called Verdant's name, the room erupted in applause. Alana's acceptance speech was gracious and heartfelt. She spoke about transparency, integrity, and the importance of breaking down barriers in the culinary world. As she thanked me, her voice cracking with emotion, I felt tears prick my eyes. This was more than just an award. It was vindication. The after-party was a whirlwind of congratulations and champagne toasts. Sparkling cider for Alana, of course. As we made our rounds, I couldn't help but notice the changing attitudes. Chefs who once sneered at me now engaged in earnest conversation. Critics who'd called for my head now asked about my upcoming book. It was surreal. As the night wound down, Alana pulled me aside. "I have an idea," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She led me to the hotel's rooftop garden, the city lights twinkling below us. With the award clutched in one hand, she dropped to one knee. "Sophia Rogers," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Will you marry me?" I laughed through my tears. "Shouldn't I be the one asking you that?" She grinned. "You snooze, you lose, critic." Our kiss was interrupted by a sudden gasp from Alana. She clutched her stomach, her eyes wide. "The baby," she whispered. "I think it's time." What followed was a chaotic blur of ambulances, hospital corridors, and frantic phone calls. 12 hours later, exhausted but elated, we welcomed our daughter into the world. As I held her, marveling at her tiny fingers and button nose, I realized how much my life had changed in just a year. From ruthless critic to expectant mother, from industry pariah to respected voice for change. Alana watched us from her hospital bed, her face glowing despite the fatigue. "What should we name her?" she asked. I thought for a moment, then smiled. "How about sage? It's an herb, so it fits our foodie theme. And it means wise, something I hope she'll be." Alana nodded, tears in her eyes. "It's perfect." The next few months were a whirlwind of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and stolen moments of sleep. But through it all, we were building something beautiful. My book, Redefining Taste, A Journey from Critic to Collaborator, hit the shelves to critical acclaim. It sparked conversations about ethics in food journalism and the need for greater understanding between critics and chefs. Verdant continued to thrive, with Alana introducing a new menu that celebrated local ingredients and sustainable practices. She even started a mentorship program for aspiring chefs from underprivileged backgrounds. As for me, I found a new calling. I started a consulting firm that bridged the gap between restaurants and critics, fostering understanding and collaboration. It wasn't always easy, but it was deeply rewarding. Our wedding was an intimate affair, held in Verdant's rooftop garden. Surrounded by herbs and vegetables, with the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, we exchanged vows. "I promise to always be honest with you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. But to temper that honesty with kindness and understanding. Alana's vows were equally moving. "I promise to never stop pushing you to grow, to try new things, and to see the world from different perspectives." As we sealed our promises with a kiss, little Sage gurgled happily in my sister Brianna's arms. The reception was a celebration of food, love, and new beginnings. Chefs from across the city contributed dishes, each one a testament to the bridges we'd built. Later that night, as Alana and I swayed to a slow song, I reflected on our journey. From that first confrontation at the pool to this moment of perfect happiness, it had been a wild ride. "What are you thinking?" Alana murmured, her head resting on my shoulder. I smiled, pulling her closer. "I'm thinking that sometimes the best stories are the ones we never saw coming." She laughed softly. "Who would have thought a scathing review would lead to all this?" As the party continued around us, I caught sight of Sage, sound asleep in her carrier. Our little family, built on a foundation of passion, honesty, and a mutual love of good food. I kissed Alana's forehead. "Here's to the next chapter," I whispered. And what a delicious chapter it would be.